All right. Hey there, folks. Again, take two. Sorry for the tech problems, but such is life. All right. Even though convention signings and other events are live events are getting back on track, I figured I'd keep bringing book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. All right. So continuing our love for crime fiction on this show and reporting back from the front lines, please welcome tonight's guest, James Latwell. Now an award-winning crime author of novels, short stories, and screenplays, James spent nearly 30 years behind bars as a prison warden and in other roles in law enforcement. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Russ. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. And
All right, all
if
good.
this is the only tech glitch we have, we're in good shape.
Yeah, we'll be all right. All right. So just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for James in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, as we always do, we'll start at the beginning. So, James, we talked a little about before. So, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I'm a California guy. Lived in California my whole life, and I was born in Napa. It's known for the wine country, but I lived there as a kid when my dad worked at San Quentin. He was the sergeant on death row,
So,
and
so wait a
yeah,
second. So, your dad was, so first of all, was it just you, brothers, sisters, or just you?
at that time my brother and sister are older, and they were gone doing their own thing. It was just me as a little nipper.
Okay, so hang on a second. So, you have, so brother, you have what, a brother and a sister? You have multiple?
Yep, yep, one of each.
One of each. So, you're the youngest of three.
I am.
And what's the age distinction between you and your next?
Quite a bit. I think probably 17 years
Oh wow.
difference. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Oh wow. So really, so you didn't grow up with your siblings,
No,
right? It was
no, not at all.
right,
No.
right. So hold on. So talk to me about that for a second. So your dad was a death. He was a guard.
Yeah, he started as a correctional officer at Soledad, and then when I was born, not long after that, he transferred to San Quentin and was a sergeant there on death row. And one of my earliest memories as a kid is with going with my mom to pick him up after his shift on death row. He was working graveyard shifts, and I remember going driving up to the prison, and that Gothic edifice of San Quentin that's kind of burned into my brain at a very early age.
So about how, to the best that you can recall, how old? What was the youngest that you can recall where you actually went to San Quentin?
I know it was before kindergarten, so I was probably 3 to 4 years old, maybe. But I actually grew up on prison grounds. My dad had several jobs that moved him all over the system, and one of them was as a we have what were called conservation camps. They're minimum security prison camps all over California, and he was the camp lieutenant, and we lived on grounds on the camp, and it was back in the days where I think the life was different, and I was able to just wander the dorms. Learned how to play pool with the inmates there when I got a little older. Had my hair cut by the inmate barber. My playmate, because it was such a remote place that we lived, was the inmate gardener. He would kind of just wheel me around in the wheelbarrow. I didn't know till years later that guy was doing time for murder, for a bank robbery. But yeah, it was a different way to grow up.
Wait, you gotta hang on there for a second. So you're a little kid. So you were you actually born? So when you were born, were you actually born in a hospital on the grounds, or you just sort of grew up there?
Yeah, that I didn't. I wasn't born in a prison hospital. That would have been a nice little touch to kind of add to
Right.
the bio. No, it was a public hospital in Napa, because at that time my dad wasn't living on prison grounds. He was just living near the prison near San Quentin, so he could do his thing.
So all right, hold on. You're just gonna have to give me a second to sort of
No, it's fine.
to absorb all this for a second. So you're born on the campus. So describe for me. So I know, as an adult, you can sort of look back and you have memories of, you from an
Right.
adult, you look back, but to the best that you can recall, what was it like? So put me inside the mind of a 5-year-old
Yeah.
growing up on this campus, I mean, I'm assuming, and if I'm wrong, correct me, that to you, that's just what life was. It wasn't like, oh, it's a weird thing. It's just this is what you do. You wake
Yeah,
up,
it
right?
was. It was just kind of that's how life was. That's where I lived. And if I wanted to, go learn how to play pool, or had an inmate try to teach me, jazz guitar out on the back kitchen dock. Um, I mean, this old black blues guitar player was trying to teach me. My hands weren't big enough to make any chord shapes at all, but
Right.
he was trying, and that's just kind of where I grew up. And I mentioned that I didn't know, what the gardener was doing time for. As a 5-year old, I didn't know. I didn't know any of that. So I
What,
was able to interact with these guys on a kind of a different level. It wasn't so much a inmate and staff person level. It was just this kind of naive, innocent level with these guys that are just happen to be all in this one place and all wear, the same kind of blue clothes. That's kind of where I looked at it.
were there other kids on that campus as well?
There were every once in a while there would be. I know there was one other kid in that was part of the firefighting forestry side of the house. His parents lived nearby, so he would show up every once in a while. But usually it was just me up in that little enclave.
Okay, so again, I'm absorbing here. So let me ask, for how many years did you grow up, did you live on that prison campus?
That one and others. Probably until I graduated high school.
So up until you were 17, 18 years old, were you,
Yeah,
so for that entire time, were you pretty much the only kid, or as you had different stops, were there other kids that you could socialize with?
there were other kids that I could socialize with later on, and especially towards the high school years. But yeah, it was kind of this different place to grow up.
Uh,
And you just learned how to kind of interact with people, um, of all different walks of life, all different, races, nationalities. Um, yeah, you learned a lot about people at a young age.
yeah, I would think so. I want to let's spend a little time here for a minute.
Yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
did you were there points, where you're the only kid at a certain point? Did you say to your folks like, how come there are no other kids around here to play with? Like, did that
No,
ever strike you as being odd, or was it just
no,
this
it it,
life?
it didn't. Yeah,
You know?
it didn't strike me as being odd. That was the life. I mean, I attended public school, and it was like
I see.
yeah,
So you
it
lived
was
there.
like an hour. Yeah, it was like an
Oh,
hour and a half bus ride to the local public school.
I see. Okay.
So then
That
I
makes
do that. Then
that makes a little
yeah,
more sense. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so then, or at any point, I mean, the other kids must have thought like, you live where? And you're walking around with who? Like, did you get, I mean, I'm assuming you must have gotten some of that,
Not really, because I mean, the prison camps have been there for years. So
right?
the local people kind of knew, okay, yeah, that's the camp.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's the lieutenant's kid. But other than that, I don't think they thought much
Huh.
else about it. Yeah,
That's, I mean, it's fascinating, but weird. So,
yeah. The only thing that was kind of awkward
right.
was later on when I was in like sophomore or junior in high school. Um, I went to the public high school, and one of the inmates' kids also was in my class.
The
So that was a little awkward,
right.
but
Whoa,
but
whoa,
we kind of
whoa.
yeah,
Don't skip. You skip past the good stuff. No. Back that up. So hold on. Listen. So
okay.
you're the son of the. I'm sorry. What was the role that you're at that point? Your
Yeah,
dad.
he was the lieutenant, the camp lieutenant.
Okay. So you're the son of the camp lieutenant, and one of the other
Right.
kids in your class was an
Right.
inmate that your dad was overseeing.
Right.
So did you, I mean, were the two of you friends? Did you talk, I mean, did you socialize or was just sort of like, yeah, did you sort of like just, did you like keep your distance? Like, how did that work? Like, what was the dynamic
Uh,
there?
yeah, the high school was small enough where you really couldn't keep distance.
Okay.
But yeah, we were friendly. I don't think we kind of hung in the same circles, but
Right.
it was a small enough class that yeah, you had to see each other, every day, and it was always just kind of this, cordial relationship. He understood it, I understood it. I
Right.
wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna out him to his friends and say,
Sure.
oh, his dad's an inmate kind of thing.
Oh,
So it was just kind of a understood kind of a little relationship that we had.
so as far as you're aware, the other kids in your class were not aware that this kid's dad was a prisoner, or did they
I
know?
don't think most of them. I don't think most of them knew. No.
Huh. Okay. Wow. So you guys had, I mean, not in a salacious way, but you guys sort of, let me ask you this, because it's a shared secret between the two of you. Did that
Yeah.
form in any way, even if it's sort of like more of vibe than anything else? Was there in maybe in a sort of a strange way, this sort of shared intimacy between you guys in the sense that you have this very unique, rare, unusual connection. It's unspoken out there, but you guys know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was
It's
there some
unspoken.
sort of
Right.
like this,
I
almost
don't.
odd
I
connection?
don't think
No.
it's. I don't think it. What it on my side, I don't think it was. I want to think that putting myself in his shoes, if that was my parent, doing time, and nobody knew about it,
I don't talk about it.
I,
Yeah.
I'd be afraid. When's that
Right.
going to come out? When's
Right.
that going to happen? When's that bomb going to drop? Um, so there might have been some tension there that either I was just oblivious to,
Right.
or he kept really really hidden. But yeah, it never boiled over to even getting close to that.
At any point, was it always just unspoken between the two of you that we're just not going to touch it? Or did you actually ever have a conversation that you said, like, don't worry, I'm never going to say anything. It stays in the vault.
Yeah, I think it was kind of unspoken. It was kind of stays in the vault. I know we had at least one or two conversations that he had gone up to visit his dad at the
Right.
at the camp, and I was there, and I just kind of waved to him in the visiting room, as I was walking through. Um, but yeah, that's about as much as we acknowledged that that was his reality and what he was dealing with his family.
Right. So talk to me a little bit more about this. So you grow up, your not just your formative years, all your years, in
Yeah,
this kind of unique environment. In a certain way, is there an equivalent to say, almost like being an army brat? Like where
it's got a lot of the same kind of flavor. Yeah, you've got that same kind of here's the rules and expectations of the camp or the prison.
right?
Yeah, you're kind of held to a standard, I think, for some of that.
But true, I didn't think of it that way. I guess I was thinking more in terms of, so how many different campuses did you actually live on throughout those,
Oh wow.
18
Let's see, Mountain Home Conservation Camp, Susanville, Growlersburg. Yeah, probably three that we lived. That as I was growing up, we lived in
right,
three different prison
right,
prison environments. Yeah.
right. So I guess sort of the fact that, you moved around a bit, but each kind of campus in a way was probably very similar. Like, some of
Yeah.
the layouts were a little different, but essentially structurally, it's, you live in the sort of civilian quarter of the prison campus,
Right.
correct? Is that
Right.
kind of how that worked?
That's pretty accurate. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Right.
a good way to think of it.
So at any point, did any sense of fear kick in? Like, wow, there's some like really violent dudes like on the other side of that wall? Or was it always just you were so acclimated from such a young age that it was just sort of, this is just kind of where I live?
It came up a couple of times. There were a couple of kind of oddball characters that were just kind of trying to push the limits and see if they could get a reaction from me or from other inmates. And then a couple of times my dad came home, at night, bloodied and beaten from, having an assault at the prison or at the camp.
Wait, so
And
your dad came home beaten up?
yeah, yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. I mean, it happens,
Right.
with inmate population, and yeah, you see that, and you wonder, yeah, it could happen. So it starts to, and that wasn't until I was, probably 10, 12, in that area, that yeah, there's something there that that could go off at any time, and you just never really know it.
So when you're in this environment, and you mentioned a little bit about the gardener, some that you interacted with some of the inmates, but to
Sure.
them it wasn't to you it wasn't necessarily like, oh, those are the scary inmates. It's almost sort of like they're just kind of guys who live on the campus a bit,
Right.
and interacted with them. So talk to me about, I mean, you touched upon it very briefly just a few minutes ago, but talk to me a little bit about what sort of insights do you glean from about the human experience? Because this is,
Yeah.
that, you grew up in an environment that probably, less than one quarter of 1% or less of the entire population on Earth grows up in. I mean,
Probably.
you're one of maybe, 1,000 people or 5,000 people on the planet who grew
Mhm.
up in that kind of environment. So,
Yeah.
and having, what do you glean about people, the human experience at that?
Yeah, I think it did give me kind of a peek at what people what what causes people to come and end up in prison. And sometimes it's just bad decisions. I mean, the good people making bad decisions. And um yeah, it's I remember one cook in particular in the kitchen. Um, Brilliant guy, but he just could not stay on the streets, and he was always coming back to prison. But yeah, you talk to him, and he says, yeah, I made mistakes, and but here I am again. But yeah, a lot of, and you start to learn that, as an early age, that yeah, substance abuse is a real thing, and
Yeah.
it drives people in to make bad decisions and end up in places like that.
All right. So in your formative years, aside from living in this really um unusual environment, like what else were you into? Were you into sports, music? Like what was your, like, what kept you busy?
Yeah, a lot of it was sports, after school activities like that. Um, yeah, I like to listen to music. Couldn't play a lick, even though
What
they
did
tried to teach me how to play.
what sports did you what were you into?
Primarily, let's see, probably baseball, wrestling, cross country.
Okay. Okay. So did you have, were you at that time, were you a, we, and I'm assuming you grew up what, in the 70s and 80s or
Hmm.
thereabouts? All right.
Yep.
So right. So you're a 70s and 80s kid like me. So, were you a reader? Were you into, what did you watch? What did you read? Like what was your, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Always a reader, and living in some of these remote places, reading was a big deal. Early on, I think some of my first connections were with science fiction. I loved a lot of the earlier science fiction, Clark and Bradbury and those kinds of things. And then I kind of got into a little bit of the classic horror stuff, the gothic kinds of things like that. But yeah, I've always been a reader, and I still am. But yeah, that started pretty early.
okay. 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 So, all right. So you clearly had a very, a strong sort of psychic impression upon you, living in this environment, right? You lived in this
Sure.
environment. Your dad was a professional, and you saw. Let me ask. I wanted to ask you this. So your dad, what, if anything, what did he tell you? So he's in responsible for how, I don't know how many at a time, whether it's hundreds or thousands of
Hmm.
inmates at a time. What if anything did he tell you? What lessons or warnings did he pass along to you about what the prison system is for, how it works, how people get up there? did, I assume in its way, it's sort of like if your dad was a cop and he would come home and tell like, oh God, you never guess what, oh, out on the street today, I had this
Yeah,
case or this
yeah.
happened. Like, did you hear like, did he come home with stories about what happened or not really? Should he keep it from you?
Not not too often. I know that when he was working at death row, um, they were still actively executing prisoners.
Right.
So he worked several of the executions there. And I noticed, on those days, he'd come back and it was pretty quiet. He didn't talk about what happened, but later reflecting back, it's like, oh, that's what was going on, why he was really, really quiet those days. But he didn't talk a lot about, what was going on in the prison, what he experienced. And I don't remember him telling me, when we lived on the prison grounds, look out for this or don't do that. It was just kind of, if anything, I think the inmates understood, hey, this is the lieutenant's kid. Don't mess with him, because it can make my life worse, kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
But
Right. Wow.
yeah, I don't remember any instruction manual that Dad passed down to me.
Okay. And I mean, even, later in life, did he, when you were older, did he then say, oh, well, here's a couple, did he like share any stories or was it kind of like, almost like, soldiers who come back from war and they just, they just want to leave it behind them and they don't talk about it.
Yeah, later on in in my career, we had some, we actually had some of the same inmates, that
Wow.
he had,
Oh, get
and then
out.
I
Did you
had.
really? Wow.
Yeah, a couple
Wow.
of one Aryan Brotherhood member in particular who got into a minimum security camp that my dad ran, escaped. My dad caught him, and then got him back into the system, and he ended up in my cell block at Folsom.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
That's trippy.
yeah. That the guy thought it was pretty trippy too. He says, "I can't get rid of you guys. You can't leave me alone."
Oh, good. You the 12 boys, man. Come on.
Yep, yep.
Holy cow. So, all right. So, before I knew all this, I was sort of going to be a little more curious about how you ended up going into the professionally following in that path, but it seems pretty clear what laid the what
Maybe
laid
it
the
did. I didn't
groundwork,
intend to.
right?
Yeah, it probably laid some foundation, but I didn't intend to go that way. I remember I was in, junior college taking, administration to justice classes because there was less math involved in that than there was, other majors. So I ended up going down that route, and it just kind of unfolded that way.
Wow, wow. Okay, so you take some classes. So how did you end up ultimately, how did you end up taking a job in the prison system? How did that happen?
Yeah. The way I got there was right as I was finishing my uh, my college degree. I had a job in juvenile hall in a local probation department. And I was going to graduate school, so I found a job that I could do my reading and homework at night while I was at work. So I everybody's locked down. I can sit there and read my graduate stuff, get my do all my homework, check on the dorms, and everybody's still there, and then get out at daybreak and go about my school life, and then come back and do it again. That's kind of how I got in the door, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. As from juvenile hall to a probation officer, did that for about 7 years, and then I went to prison, uh, and started off at Folsom.
So I don't, that's interesting. So just real quick, because we have so much to get to. So as a
Yeah, yeah.
probation officer, what if any, so how did those years as a probation officer maybe prepare you? So you're on, let's say one side of the fence operating, you're out on the streets dealing with,
Right.
parolees and working with them. How did that prepare you for life on the other side,
Mhm.
being inside the box with those guys?
Yeah, there was a little bit of a shift, and but not as much as you think. I mean, the biggest thing that you see differently is when you're in prison, the inmates don't have anything else to hide. They still play games, they still, do their gang business and all that, but out on the street they have a persona. They're trying to make a reputation and all that kind of thing, and you're dealing with that.
Right.
But inside, they're caught, they've been arrested, convicted, they've been sent away. All of that kind of nonsense is kind of in the background, and you're dealing just with that guy and his behavior. I think it was a good background to get me,
Right.
to the prison side. I know I didn't know until after I retired that it would actually help me become a writer,
Right.
because I was writing pre-sentence reports for the sentencing judge, and I, have to interview the inmate in the jail, talk to the detectives, read all the reports, talk to the victims, get their statement on the offense and how it affected them, and cobble that all together for a judge
Right.
in a narrative for a sentencing report.
Right. Right. Right.
And then I realized years later, I've been writing crime stories all along.
I just
So
didn't
this
just
kind of
didn't know it, right?
didn't
So
know it, and that kind of gave me the confidence to move forward.
so unfortunately for me, I had a few run-ins in my earlier life with law enforcement, and none of them went well, including a very short stint. Legitimately, I wore the bracelets. I was behind the bar. I was behind the bars. Yep,
Hmm.
and not a good place. True story, but for another day. So most civilians never spend a day behind bars, and thank
Right.
goodness. So what we tend to know is what we read in the news and what's in the movies and books and blah blah blah. So
Right.
what really goes on? I'm not talking about the local jail where you're spending a drunk tank. I'm
Right.
talking
Right.
prison. What really goes on there? I mean, is it as I mean, I was in a bad place with very dangerous, violent guys, like no joke. This
Right.
was this was
Right.
no joke. I mean, my buddy was literally handcuffed to like a multiple rapist. I mean, serious stuff here. Is
Yeah.
it as rough and dangerous behind bars as we're often led to believe, or is the violence and corruption that we think goes on overstated?
It's difficult to pin it down. I mean, the media, both in television, film, and even in fiction, you know, books, it overplays it a bit. But I mean, is every prison dangerous? No. There are certain prisons that, yeah, when you go to Pelican Bay or when you go to Corcoran or Folsom when I was there, that was pretty much the end of the line. You had to screw up everywhere else in the system before you got there.
Right,
So you kind of earned your way there. Um, yeah, there's that old saying that, yeah, you walk on the yard and punch the biggest guy you can.
right.
That'll get you a shank in the kidney, but that's all it's going to get you. Yeah, you just can't do that kind of thing. There's a real culture in prison, and a lot of it is set up around racial lines, just
Mhm.
because that's how they control each other's population. Um, if you're a white inmate, you're going to associate only with whites. You're going to buy your drugs from whites. You're not going to cross racial lines to make any deals with the other inmates, blacks and Mexicans. You're going to stick to your own,
Right.
and you're not going to get involved in anybody else's business. You're going to do your time. So, there's some basic rules, and it's a convict code basically, and as long as you abide by that, you can do your time pretty uneventfully.
So I'm just going to push back just a little. So some years ago, I was introduced to a guy through a mutual friend who happened to be an investigator in the New Jersey prison system. And I asked him some of the same questions that we're talking about right now. And in particular, I
Mhm.
asked him about contraband. Now, this is what he
Yeah,
told me. And again, it's one person, so one person doesn't mean that he's right overall, but he said he had
sure.
been in the system for 20 something years. And he said that it's very easy to get things smuggled into prison, whether it's porn or food or drugs or kind of anything else. And this is according to him, and he said that the guards were the most corrupt of all, and they were in on it because they didn't get paid very well and it was dangerous, and they were kind of in on it often on smuggling. What's your take on it?
I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, California is a little bit different in terms of the pay, the reimbursement for staff, and it's a good job, and they get paid very well. But there's only three ways contraband can come into the prison, and one of them is by staff, whether they're compromised or extorted. The other's through visiting, and the other's by mail. And really, those used to be the big three. That's the only way contraband can come in. And now we have drones, where drones are coming in over the prison and dropping contraband on the yard, whether it's tobacco, cell phones, drugs, that kind of thing. So it kind of opens up a whole new world on contraband. But yeah, it's kind of, if you think of it, what I used to think of it, it's the inmate's job, the convict's job, to find ways to bring stuff in, to get stuff smuggled in. And it's our job to figure out how and stop that while they look for the next new thing to get their contraband in.
So let me ask you this. Let's just say, aside from, let's say, drugs or weapons, did you really care if they were smuggling in porn or books or a PlayStation to keep them occupied? Or was it just, no, you can't?
Yeah, you can't make a differentiation. If it's contraband, it's contraband. But because you don't know what that is being bartered for, on the prison economy. I didn't see any PlayStations, but I saw cell phones. Cell phones were a big commodity coming in, and those are a problem because gang enforcers in the prison can use that communication technology to order hits and things in the community and still stay in touch with their gang set. So yeah, that's a big problem. Cell phones, drugs, tobacco is a big one. Most of the prisons now went smokeless. So getting tobacco in is like a huge big deal.
Just going back to the phones for a second. I mean, again, a guy like me, most people, you think you're so clever and so smart because you hear a thing or saw a thing. So of course, but is it real? The loose word on the street for us people who know nothing, the idea is that, that gang leaders, honestly, they can run an empire from inside prison walls. Is that really how it goes?
Oh, I think it is true. When you look at the Mexican mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood in particular, I mean, they were running empires both within prison and directing street crime activity. Mexican mafia in particular did a really, they were very efficient doing both of those. So they could order hits in the community, and get people set up so they would get to prison, and so they can assault them there. I mean, they were very, very, very good at doing that kind of gang enforcement.
So overall, in the real world as it is today, is prison about reform, or is it really about just locking people in cages until they've served their time?
It's not that easy to pin it down. I mean, in California, the law says the purpose of imprisonment is punishment. But what we figured out over the years is, if we don't do anything different inside to change this guy or woman in their behavior, or their aptitude, or their just survival skills on the street, they're just going to come back.
Right.
So you're seeing a shift, I think, nationally, where there's more rehabilitative programs, there's more education. Mental health is a huge issue in prison.
Right.
So we've got to do something to address those. Otherwise, they're just going to keep coming back.
Right.
So we kind of have to,
That was kind of my next question, was about, recidivism rates are pretty high. So how much of that do you think is really, it's based on what the inmate already brought to the table the first time they were incarcerated, and how much of it is becoming that they become more of a violent or paranoid person, being locked up for months or years at a time with other aggressive men, some of whom are really violent, and or suffer from mental illness, mental illnesses and addictions that are just not properly treated?
Sure. I think we saw mental health as one of the big triggers of releasing people that didn't get treatment in the streets to begin with. Because a lot of the prisons ended up being dumping grounds for community mental health programs that were just non-existent. So yeah, Johnny got in trouble, committed a felony. Johnny's also crazy, and so you send him to prison. It's only the last couple of decades that you really even saw prison mental health come up. I mean, I worked in a couple of those units where the severely mentally ill, I mean, you're talking schizophrenics and
Right.
psychotics.
Right.
They have group counseling sessions, and you got the clinician sitting in the middle, surrounded by cages. The inmates are in cages, taking part in group therapy. It's
Right.
the weirdest thing you've ever seen, but that's the only way to get them that kind of treatment safely. But
Right.
yeah, we have to do more on the front end before we release them back out, or they're just going to come right back.
Right. So for how many years were you actually a warden, or I think, or assistant warden? You said
Yeah, associate warden.
associate warden. Sorry.
I was probably associate warden for 3-4 years, and then I was the director of state parole when I retired.
So while you were a warden, were there any situations where you were faced with like a really difficult situation, whether it was a prison break or maybe inmate on inmate violence or a riot, anything of that nature, or did it never really get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, even before I was an associate warden, yeah, inmate on inmate violence was huge. There were actually at Folsom, old Folsom prison, there were wars between the different factions, the Aryan Brotherhood and the Black Guerrilla family, and the Black Guerrilla family and the Mexican Mafia. They were all at war. So every day, every single day, we'd have a stabbing on the yard. You'd have to go out and cart the victims off, take them to the hospital. Our gunmen, if they were able to see the event unfold, were able to shoot the victim or shoot the assailant and prevent any further injury to the victim. So that kind of thing was going on. I mean, every single day. So you have this climate that's really toxic, and everybody just kind of feeds off that. So the prison goes in lockdown for quite a while. Then you start bringing them back out again until they get to the numbers that they feel safe and doing it again, and they're going to start stabbing each other again. So it's kind of a cycle, but you can kind of sense it and see it before it starts to happen.
What kind of an impact does that kind of violence have on the inmates who are not involved? They're just trying to duck and I just want to stay as far away from this as possible. I mean, I got to
Yeah,
imagine it makes them pretty nervous.
yeah, and you see the ones that are definitely not aligned with any prison gang group. They're just don't want to do their time and get back home. And yeah, they sometimes get sucked into the violence because they're targeted just because of their race, and the other race is going to go and assault that group. Um, but most of the time, they just try to stay down, stay out of the way, and try to get a transfer or get back home as soon as they can without any more time being added for a new disciplinary offense.
Right. So, oh God, we can go on forever, but I have so many questions I want to ask. Um, so let's just switch for a minute. When
Yeah,
did you first get and we'll get to some more prison questions later, if we have time. So when did you
sure.
first get serious about, so now you're a crime writer. When did you
Yeah,
first get serious about writing fiction?
I didn't start writing commercial fiction until I retired from the prison. So I didn't think I had the time to do it. I probably did, but I just didn't organize it right. And my mental bandwidth probably couldn't have taken anything else with everything I was dealing with at the prison or in parole at the time. Um, yeah, so I remember sitting in the backyard, reading a book with my cup of coffee. He's freshly retired, and it's a crime fiction book, and I'm sitting there, and it was crap. It was an awful book. So I just kind of tossed it aside, and I said, "Well, I can do better than this." And it was like, "Can you?" It was kind of
Right.
this challenge.
Right.
So it kind of sent me on a little journey to figure out, can I do this? What do I have to do? What don't I know? So I started taking, classes at places like Book Passage, at the Mystery Writers Conference they do every year in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's a great small conference for aspiring writers or new writers that want to kind of learn what the business is about and how to interact with, this new business model, because it was entirely different for me.
Right.
Didn't know anything about, pacing or dialogue or
Right.
scene structure or story structure.
Right.
So you start to learn all those things,
Right.
at these
Right.
conferences like this.
So how much you alluded to it a little bit earlier on, but how much just real quick to just a quick interlude for the folks who came in a
Yeah.
little late. If you have any questions or comments for James, put them in the chat box and we'll get to some at the end. So how much of your real life criminal justice experience now finds its way to the page?
I'm asked that a lot, and it's not as much as you'd think. I mean, because I worked in some pretty dark places, security housing units, which they're prisons within a prison. So if you kill somebody in the general population unit, you came to my unit. So we had, a whole cell block of nothing but that.
Hmm.
And I don't write prison books, and my books aren't terribly dark. I mean, they're crime fiction. Things happen, people get hurt, but I don't write prison books, and I don't write, excessively dark or violent kinds of things. But the characters that I ran across in those 30 years, or some of the situations I have drawn from, and that were kind of the catalyst to some of the stories and books that I've written.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So, given that you spent, 30 years or so or thereabouts, you grew up in
Yeah,
the prison,
right,
ecosystem, and you spent
right.
30 years in law enforcement in one, form or another. So, what do you think about books, TV shows, and movies? What do you in what ways do you think they actually portray the prison system, accurately, and how much do they get wrong? And lastly, what if there's one thing that just absolutely drives you bonkers that they just get wrong? Like, what is that?
Yeah, only one thing.
Or any
Yeah,
number of things.
I really can't watch a lot of shows that deal specifically with prison or corrections and that kind of thing, because a lot of what is on the media and on TV and film is sensationalized. It's entertainment, and it's supposed to be,
Right.
but it doesn't really reflect what really happens behind bars. Most of the time in prison, it's pretty boring. And then you've got these minutes or moments of panic and that kind of stuff sprinkled in. But TV would have you believe it's that way all the time.
Right.
A couple of shows that just absolutely get under my skin. Orange is the New Black. There is nothing remotely accurate about that show.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it just ticks me off every time I did try to watch it because everybody was saying how
Right.
wonderful it was, and
Right.
the, it would not unfold that way. This multicultural cast of different races, getting along and doing all kinds of things together. That's not how prison works. They wouldn't cross racial lines,
Right.
primarily, and things like that. The relationships that happen, I think they were overblown in that show. There's another example, the show Reacher. I love the show.
Yeah.
Great show. And
I was
there's a
I was
scene
I
in
was
the
I was watching it an hour ago.
Oh, okay. There's a scene in the first season. That's just a couple of episodes in, where Reacher gets arrested and goes to that jail or that prison,
Right.
and this little skeevy, prison guard, tells him that strip down, we're gonna search you and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Reacher spouts off a Supreme Court case and says you can't touch me or
Right.
search me because it has nothing to do with the kind of offense you arrested me for.
Right.
And that's wrong. It's absolutely incorrect. Supreme Court law is actually the opposite. The security has the paramount importance, and we can search anybody, anytime, anywhere. But in real life, if that were to happen, if a guy were to do that, a big guy like Reacher, we would get six of our biggest guys, and we
Right.
would hold him down,
And
and we would search him.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's gonna be searched.
Yeah.
But
Sadly,
for that show,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but for that show, that scene made sense.
Right.
I mean, that was the first time that you really got into Reacher's head. You saw him actually spout complete sentences, and he was it made sense for his character. It revealed a lot of character that
Right. Yeah, yeah. It was a good character moment, but not a real moment.
Exactly. And for that purpose, it worked perfectly.
Right, right. Okay. All right. Well, that's great. But now it's a time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories, including a few new ones I created out just for tonight's show. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories
Okay.
are known unknowns, The Wizard of Oz, music lover, friend or foe, true crime kink, apocalypse, and kick him in the junk. All right. You ready? Here we go.
Sure.
All right, what do we got? All right, let's see. And you got, all right, friend or foe. Interesting. So we actually touched upon this a little bit. All right, so did you ever encounter an inmate and think, you know what? If you were not on the other side of these bars, we could actually be friends.
Yeah. I mean, it was clear that some of them were there because they did, made just a stupid split moment decision and did something, that changed their life completely. So I think there are. I'll even give you a little bit more absurd example. Not a friend, but a Mexican mafia tier tender was
Tier?
sweeping the tier. Is that a tier tender?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, oh, oh,
they're basically guys that keep the tier clean, sweep and mop and that kind of thing. He was mopping the tier. I was walking by, and he made some rude comment to me or something, and you don't even listen to that stuff half the time. I got about 3 cells down, and the Mexican mafia shot caller says, Mr. Latoile, come here. He says, I'm sorry about that. We'll talk to him. It's not going to happen again. So I said, yeah, okay, thanks, Angel. And we walked off. And next day I come in, and that tier tender is beat to shit. I mean, he's bruised, he's bloody, his eyes are swollen up. And they gave him a talking to.
whoa.
It wasn't because they respected me. They didn't want staff to start getting into the Mexican mafia business.
Right.
If that guy draws attention to him or their business,
Bad for them.
Yeah, their contraband, their drugs, everything else they've got going on is at risk. So that's the kind of friend and foe thing that goes on in prison. They'll take care of things, just leave us alone.
Right. So they were managing the ecosystem.
Yes, they were.
Right. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, now we're going to now I'm going to have you pick your poison. I got 3 choices for you, but I'm not going to tell you what's behind each. You got
Okay.
A, B, or C.
Oh, let's go B.
B. All right. So this is a book of a lifetime. So this one has a bit of a long wind up. So bear with me for a minute.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you 2 options, okay, that will define the rest of your writing career. But you can only pick one. And here are the options. Okay, option number 1. Your next book is an international bestseller. You win every award there is. You make tons of money. Your book gets made into a movie that wins the Academy Award for Best Picture. You can ride this success forever. You will always be that writer. However, every book you write after that, and I'm talking every single one, is an absolute dumpster fire, critically trashed and a commercial zero. You are called a washed up hack who can no longer even string together 2 cohesive sentences. Or choice number.
They say that now, Russ. So,
so what's different, right? Or choice number 2. You can keep writing as you're doing. You're generally well respected, but there won't be any sort of big remunerations there. And, ultimately you'll just kind of keep going as you go. So if it were up to you, given those 2 choices, book of a lifetime or steady as she goes, which career path do you pick?
I'm going to have to pick the steady as you go. And it's not even so much steady. I think every book that, a writer puts out there, everyone's just a little bit better and a little bit better. You continue to learn through your process. And here I am now with my 7th book. And it feels like, okay, I'm starting to hit my stride. I'm getting it now, kind of thing. You learn and you get better and better, and the books hopefully get better and better along with it.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. All right, so now I'm going to give you some truth serum. All right, I got 10 questions. Just answer quickly. You ready? All right.
Okay.
Okay, favorite flavor ice cream.
Vanilla.
What's one food you will never eat ever for any reason?
Brussels sprouts.
So
That was the condition of getting my engagement
I'm,
to my wife. No Brussels sprouts in the house.
I'm with you. Bucket list destination anywhere in the world.
Um, Probably Bali.
Interesting. Okay. Scariest movie you ever saw?
Oh, The Exorcist. When it first came out, it scared
Oh,
me to death.
God, you and me both. Ugh. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I think invisibility would be cool.
Okay. So we touched on this a little bit, but I'm asking anyway. Do you play any musical instruments? And if not, which one if you could?
I play a little guitar now, mostly make a lot of noise, but yeah, I'm having fun with that.
All right, fair. Cats or dogs?
Uh, Dogs.
Okay. Favorite cocktail? And if you don't drink, your favorite unwind beverage?
An old fashioned.
All right. You can see a live performance, sports, music, theater, whatever, any seat, any venue, any time in history. What's your choice?
I'd go back and see Stone Temple Pilots again.
Oh, God, yes. Yes, I am such a huge STP fan. I never got a
Oh,
chance to
me.
see him live.
I saw him a couple of times, and when Scott Weiland was doing his little solo tour there at the end, we caught two shows like about a month before he died.
Oh, wow.
Amazing shows. Yeah.
Oh, God, so, oh, we are mind melded. They are one of my all-time favorite bands. Absolutely.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
Same here.
If you could get a continuation of any canceled TV show ever, what would it be?
Let's see. Canceled or just ran its course? I'd like to see more Justified again. Not the new version of it, but the original Rayland
Okay.
in Kentucky. Terriers. Terriers was a show that was canceled after for 1 year, and that's an
Once,
awesome show.
yes, that was good. I enjoyed that with the Donal Log,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
yeah, it was from the guy from Sean Ryan, right? The guy who did the Shield. I think it was the
And
same
yeah,
guy. All right.
Thief Sutton was also a writer on that one.
Okay, yeah.
Might have been a producer on that one.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So we have a little time for some questions for the audience. If you have anything, put it in the chat box. I'm not seeing anything right now, but I've got a lot of stuff I want. We're going to go back. There's a couple of questions I wanted to hit you up for before. So if I'm wrong on my information on my home, I try to do my homework, but I don't always get it right. So when you started out at one point, so you worked in under Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was the governor of California. Did you
Yep.
ever did you ever meet him
Yeah,
personally?
I did. He appointed me as director of parole.
Wow. I mean, so what was it like to meet and work for the Terminator?
It was kind of weird. Yeah, he didn't show up a lot. He just brought his people in,
Right.
and that's kind of when you get a peek behind the curtain on how politics really works, and
Right.
it's scary.
Mm.
The people that get brought into for staff assignments and deputy chiefs of staff and that kind of thing. It's like they know nothing about the prison system, about corrections, but they're overseeing the prison system, and you kind of have to teach them, like, yeah, we have to let them out because the law says he's done his time, and he needs to be let out. That just the basics kinds of things that people just don't know.
So in as much as he was responsible for your position, how do you feel that did he accept what you told him? Was he like amenable, or was he kind of just,
Well, I think a couple of us, the jobs we had in the prison, told him that I'll be the guy that never brings you good news. I mean, that's kind of the relationship you have. That
right, right.
nobody cares about prison or parole as long as it's quiet. Everybody's inside, and parolees aren't off shooting people. But when it happens, you know, I'm going to tell you the real deal and the truth, and it's not going to be varnished. And sometimes that's hard to hear.
Wow. How did he handle it when you gave him bad news?
Yeah, the administration handled it pretty well for the most part. Once they understood the dynamics of the prison system doesn't control, LA County Sheriff's Office. We have nothing to do with that.
Right.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
So another question I wanted to ask before. So once someone serves their time, they are
Mhm.
forevermore a convict. How do you feel that we as a nation do in giving? This could be from a government standpoint, even from just a general citizen standpoint. How do you feel that?
Right.
How do we do in giving ex-prisoners an actual chance to turn the corner, or do we just continue to fail them, kind of really never letting them outlive their past mistakes?
I think we do a little, but it's just that it's just a little. There are a couple of smaller programs, like just here in California, where um, inmates are learning, a trade before they go out, and they're actually getting an apprenticeship with the union
Right.
inside prison, so that they have a union job when they get out. Those are the kinds of things, and tech skills, and just modern survival skills that they have to go out there. And I think we need to do more of it. We don't do enough of it.
So, you had said that, within the prisons themselves, that there's a lot of self-segregation, right? Just,
Yes.
kind of, whether it's culturally or racially, you just sort of, you stay in your own pack, and that's just the way it
Hmm.
works. How
Right.
do you think that, how much racism, I'm talking, this is nationally, goes into, the way that prisoner people actually end up in prison? How much of an impact does that actually have on who ends up behind bars and who doesn't?
I don't know that I'm in the place to be able to talk about that, because I saw who the system churned out. So
Right,
I didn't see the charging decisions that the DA made. I didn't see the plea bargains. I only saw the end result of that.
right,
So whoever came, out the back door of the courthouse came to us. But I can tell you that, the prison culture, the prison inmate culture, is very race sensitive and race oriented. Um, the Aryan Brotherhood is kind of built around a racist model,
right.
and to a degree, so is the Black Guerrilla family. So you get the BGF and the Aryan Brotherhood. That's kind of how they operate, and it kind of churns that kind of animosity between the
Right.
groups.
Right. All right. So lastly, if you personally had the power to actually do it, what is one policy that you would instill nationwide into the entire prison ecosystem?
Oh wow. Huh. Well, I think we've seen, some benefits from really comprehensive substance abuse programs, and I mean, not just, Nancy Reagan standing up and saying don't do drugs, but
Right, right.
we did a couple of therapeutic community programs in California prisons, where inmates spent the last year of their incarceration in a housing unit together, and all they did, their job was treatment. That's all they did. And we brought in ex-offenders and ex-addicts as the treatment professionals. They don't need to hear it from us, but people who have been where they were at, walked those same paths and made the same mistakes, but still show that there's a positive, outcome that's possible for them too. I think that probably has more impact than anything else. So we saw some good results with that, lower recidivism, and then you couple that with ongoing treatment in the community when they're released, and I think you start to see a difference. And you're talking about harm reduction. You're talking about, not just drugs, but domestic violence rates, and the crime rates, the violent crime rates behind it drop too. So that kind of thing, I think, would be where
Right.
I would go.
Right. Okay, fair enough. All right, guys. So we're almost out of time. So I want to share some, I'm going to share my screen because we've got some good stuff to show. So give me 1 second here. Let's see what we got. Hopefully we can do this without too much of a uh, all right, James.
Yeah, there it is.
So what are we looking at? Talk to
Ah,
me.
yeah, it's Face of Greed. Face of Greed is the newest book. It's the latest of my novels. This is the first one in a new series. It's set in Sacramento, in Northern California, where I live, and it features a female detective, Emily Hunter. And yeah, it's fun to play with a new character, new series. but Emily is a little sarcastic, a little, sacrilegious at times, pushes back against the administration, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's fun to play with her as a woman in a male dominated profession. She's had to work twice as hard to get the same recognition that her counterparts get. Now, in Face of Greed, she's walking into a home invasion in the opening pages,
Right.
and the home invasion goes horribly wrong. The homeowner's killed. The wife of the homeowner witnesses the crime. She's battered. But Emily notices right away, this is not your ordinary crime scene. The chief of police is already there when she rolls up. The mayor's there. This is a politically connected power broker that's been murdered, and he had secrets. And those secrets are worth a lot of money. So she starts to unravel, who's behind those secrets and who wants them, and who is willing to kill to get them. So it's been a fun little story to kind of unravel. She's also dealing with a mother with dementia, so she's kind of balancing her life with caregiving for her mom,
Right.
and this complex investigation. So it puts her under a little bit of stress, and how she reacts to it is kind of fun to watch.
All right, great. So is it out now?
Yeah, it's out, and the audiobook's out, the Kindle book's out, the hardback is up. So yeah, it's out and doing well, and it's been nominated for a Lefty Award at the upcoming Left Coast Crime. So I'm excited
All right,
about
fantastic. You hear that, folks? Grab this book. And when are we going to see the next one?
Let's see. I've got actually two coming out this year. One in July and another one in December. The July book is going to be called Served Cold, and it's goes back to the Detective Parker series that I'm working on. It's set in the desert Southwest, and it deals with immigration issues, immigration policy, and who's really caught in that struggle. And the sequel to this one, sequel to Face of Greed, comes out I think in December, and it's called River of Lies, and it's also set in Sacramento, where Emily and her partner Javier Medina are investigating the homeless camps that have been burnt in the city and forcing people out. And Emily soon realizes that even the homeless have something that somebody really wants.
Right. Wow. All right. Well, folks, it sounds great. Grab a copy of Face of Greed and look out for James' next book. Okay. As for me, keeping with the crime angle, I'll encourage you to check out my ongoing series featuring hard-boiled private eye Angela Hardwick. It's a gritty sci-fi action thriller filled with danger, unsavory characters, and persistent threat of life behind bars. In my mind, Hardwick is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, part Sarah Connor, with some Twilight Zone mixed in. And the novels are Crackle and Fire, Fractured Lives, Hot Ash, and the latest one, Blunt Force Rising. I'm now finishing book 5, which will be out in September. All 4 novels in the series are available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. All right, that's our show. I want to thank my guest, James Latwell, for talking Life Behind Bars, and I want to thank everyone who's watching at home and for being patient with our little tech snafu. And as always, please be gentle, be kind, be generous of spirit, and for God's sakes, go read a book. And I'll see you all next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you, Russ.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you. All right.